Hey everybody, Spacewizard here. For this week's video, I'm going to be discussing secrets in the Whispers of the Old Gods meta, how they were used in the previous meta, and why they're in their current state. Previous to the release of Standard, every class that could use secrets did use secrets in just about every high-tier variant they could play. Mages played Ice Block and Ice Barrier and Freeze Mage and Mirror Entity and Tempo Mage. Paladins played Avenge, Competitive Spirit, Noble Sacrifice, and Redemption and Secret Paladin. And Hunters played Explosive Trap and Snake Trap and Face Hunter and Freezing Trap and Mid-Range Hunter. In the modern-day post-standard meta, Mages and Hunters both still play secrets, but to a much lesser extent, while Paladins have stopped playing secrets almost entirely. Mages still play Ice Block and Ice Barrier and Freeze Mage, but Tempo Mage has stopped playing Mirror Entity. Mid-range Hunters still play Freezing Trap, and actually play Explosive Trap now too, but Face Hunter is no longer a viable deck, so it can't play any secrets for obvious reasons. So looking at Mage decks, the big difference between pre-standard and post-standard is obviously the removal of Mad Scientist from the playable card pool. It's certainly fair to say that this card is solely responsible for making Mirror Entity as viable as it was, and therefore without Mad Scientist, you can't really play Mirror Entity. What's personally surprising to me is how little the removal of Mad Scientist affected Freeze Mage. Without the added draw power and speed from its Death Rattle, Freeze Mage is without a doubt weaker than it was before the release of Standard. However, every other deck in the game also became weaker along with Freeze Mage, with the sole exception of Aggro Shaman, and the overall quality of decks in general is much lower in the post-standard meta. So for the time being, Freeze Mage should remain a top-tier deck, but if the meta speeds up, as it likely will with the inclusion of more card sets, it's going to need some new cards so that it can keep up with everything else. Secret Paladins and their classic variations simply aren't viable anymore because the deck's strength came from how well it could curve out. It had essentially the best possible on-curve play for just about every turn, which made it impossible to defend against if its starting hand was good enough. In the modern meta, with cards like Shielded Minibot and Muster for Battle no longer being playable, Secret Paladins have pretty much vanished from competitive play and the ranked ladder. It should be noted, however, that a standard version of Secret Paladin did make it to the top 10 on the EU ladder, but for obvious reasons this version of the deck has yet to see any play in tournaments and isn't being used at all on the US ladder, so we can't be sure how truly viable it is quite yet. Given that it did manage to get into the top 10, it seems unlikely that it was just a fluke, and so we may still see Paladin playing secrets in a few weeks once everyone learns how to play the deck. And even if the deck doesn't end up being viable in the current meta, the next card set should still be able to make it competitively viable with the addition of one or two solid 2 and 3 drops to fill the void left by Shielded Minibot and Muster for Battle. Hunter has seen probably the biggest shift in what is and isn't viable when it comes to secrets. Mid-range Hunter just straight up can't play as many secrets as it could before because of the removal of Mad Scientist, and so 2 secrets is essentially the absolute maximum you're going to be seeing in mid-range Hunter lists. Otherwise, they run the risk of getting runner secrets and slowing themselves down too much. I would argue that one of the biggest reasons Face Hunter is no longer viable is the removal of Mad Scientist. Arcane Golem is the other big hit the deck took, but there are ways of getting around having less burst damage in your deck, especially now that things are so slow. But Face Hunters pretty much need to run secrets for the deck to be viable. Explosive Trap being by far the most important since it counters other aggro decks and deals some extra damage to the enemy hero. The problem is that you can't really justify playing it on its own in a hard aggro deck. Not doing anything other than playing a secret on turn 2 will most of the time be a death sentence for a Face Hunter, which is why Mad Scientist was so important. You could effectively play a minion and a secret at the same time. It also made your deck a bit thinner by drawing you the secret it played, which might actually be just as important as playing the secret, since you wouldn't be top decking all of your burn as a Face Hunter. So the deck is sort of just left in this awkward position where it needs to play secrets, but it no longer has any secret support to justify playing the secrets. It's the exact same situation that Tempo Mage is in, only Tempo Mage is a strong enough deck without Mirror Entity that it still has a presence on the ladder even without Mad Scientist. So the general situation with secrets is that the majority of them just aren't strong enough to get played without any real support for them. And in the case of the Paladin, the only deck that has secret support may or may not be viable in the current metagame. As more card sets get released, it's almost a guarantee that we're going to see secrets become just as viable as they were in the pre-standard meta, because decks and archetypes can only get better as more cards get added to the game. That's it for this week's video, guys, but don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll be back next week with another new video, but until then, you can check out Hearthhead.com or either of its social media pages for all sorts of Hearthstone-related content. See you next time, everybody.